Hey guys, Charlotte here. How's it going? I am so excited to be with you guys today. I wanted to show you where I am. Before I start, I want to show you where I am. I am in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. We had to come up here to Sparwood to do some work, and I have just had the most amazing day so far today. I'm going to see if I can turn my phone around to show you this kind of scenery. So this is kind of like the backdrop of kind of where we are right now. Like, how beautiful is this? Like, this is literally what we are surrounded with right now, and I am just so excited. And this is just an amazing backdrop. So I just wanted to kind of hop on here and kind of show you guys where we are right now, and just come on. And I just thought this was probably like the perfect time to do this with you guys. I have literally just probably spent the last half an hour just driving around Sparwood, just kind of taking in this scenery. Let me see if I can kind of zoom in and kind of show you guys, like, how amazing is this? Like, how absolutely incredible is this kind of backdrop? And you know what's actually amazing here is this is not even in like right in the heart of the mountains. This is kind of like at the start of the mountains. So it's amazing. Hey Robbie. So it is, yeah, to answer Robbie's question, it is -4 degrees today, so it is just beautiful. So as you can see, I'm not wearing a jacket, the sun is shining, it's just beautiful. When we were driving down here yesterday, it was snowing pretty intensely, and we kind of couldn't see all of this, and then we got up this morning and the sun was shining. It was beautiful. So I am super excited to be here. So I'm just going to kind of get back in the car now. So I'm super excited to be here because this is just such an amazing backdrop just to kind of be in, and it just makes me feel so good. And I'm always probably my most creative when I'm here. So I wanted to show you guys that. You know what's so funny? Here's a funny story. So we got here last night to our hotel, and I realized that I had left all of our clothes at home. So yeah, so that was kind of interesting. Not all of our clothes, I should say. I'd managed to pack like underwear and socks, thank God. And I had kind of packed some pants for myself and Kyle, but we literally had no shirts, because what I would do is I put everything in like this kind of hanging, hey Juanita, and it's kind of hanging thing, like you kind of see them, you hang them up and you kind of put them in a zip-up bag kind of thing. And I had left it at home. So we got here and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. I'm so sorry. I have left all of our clothes at home. So we were kind of laughing about that, because we're like, okay, that's not really great. Luckily there's like one Mark's Work warehouse in the town that we're staying in, actually in the next town, the town to us, that we're kind of going to go to tonight. And we're going to buy some clothes, and there's a laundry service here too. So we're like, okay, we're just going to kind of roll with this. Sometimes shit happens. That's just the way that life goes, and it is what it is. So you have to just make lemonade when you get lemons, right? Or as I always say, even shit makes fertilizer. So we're like, okay, let's just roll with it. So yeah, so I wanted to talk to you guys today about narratives and about the Value Village. You know what, if there was a Value Village, we would go there, but there unfortunately is no Value Village. So it was, there's the bargain shop, or there's Mark's Work warehouse. So you know what, at this point I'm like, I'll hit up the bargain shop. I don't really care. I just need to get some clothes. So you know what, you just kind of make do with what you've got available to you, right, sometimes. So yeah, so I want to talk to you guys today about narratives and about the stories that we tell ourselves. So narratives are literally the stories and the beliefs that we have, or the beliefs that we have based upon the stories that we tell ourselves. So usually what happens is we all have a set of stories and a set of beliefs of things that we believe based upon what we have been taught growing up. And these narratives can literally come from anywhere. Right? They can be beliefs that we've been told by our parents growing up. They are beliefs that we are told based upon the experiences that we have. They are, the beliefs that we are told when we're at school. And so we kind of establish this kind of set of stories, things that we kind of tell ourselves, as we're growing up, and even into adulthood. And basically, this is what we filter the world through. This is how we understand the world. This is how we understand our environment, And so, you might have beliefs upon, money, or beliefs about relationships, or beliefs about certain people groups, or beliefs about certain professions, literally anything. They are stories that you tell yourself, either because you've had experience in something, or because that's what you've been told, and those are stories that you grow up with. They are the stories that you tell yourself over and over again on a loop. And sometimes they are subconscious. Sometimes we don't realize that we have narratives until we actually go back and examine our beliefs and examine what we believe on things to actually identify those narratives. So the narratives are simply the truths. They are our truth. They are the truths that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the people around us and the world in which we live. And they are how we understand the world around us. They are how we process what is happening around us. They are how we see the world. They are the filter through which we process everything. So they may or may not at some point have kept you safe. Like there are certain narratives that you have that will keep you safe. Like a narrative like don't play on the highway because you might get run over is actually a pretty good narrative to have because it keeps you safe. But there are certain other narratives that just no longer serve you. They just no longer are functional in your life, and sometimes they never really did. Some narratives, they never really did have a purpose or a place in your life at a certain point. And so everybody has these narratives. Everybody has these narratives. Your spouse or your partner has them. Your parents have them. Your children have them. Mentors have them. I've already said parents. Parents of your friends have them. Parents of your children have them. If I didn't mention children, your children have them. Other family members have them. Employers have them. Even store clerks have them. The gas station attendant. The clerk at the grocery store. Whoever you come into connection with, every other human being has narratives. Every other human being has a set of thoughts and beliefs which form a narrative, and that is how they make sense of the world. That is how they process their world. That's how they see their world, and based upon what they believe is actually that forms the basis of how they interact with you. So sometimes the response that you get from other people is determined by the narratives that they have. Similarly, the response that you give to other people is based upon the narratives that you have. So depending upon what you believe about the world, and depending upon what you believe about people, that will form the basis of how you engage with others, right? So sometimes, have you ever seen somebody where you have an interaction with someone and they just piss you off, and they do something and you're like, well, that was bloody rude, or wow, where the hell is this coming from? Or maybe you have this really kind of explosive internal reaction to something really just angers you. Maybe your partner does something, or your children does something, and it's literally like lighting ticker tape, or it's like a red rag to a bull, and it just really triggers something in you. That is because we have narratives that dictate and determine how we see the world. And we have narratives that we process. Everything that we see, everything that we hear, we process them through those filters, the filter of the stories that we tell ourselves and the beliefs that we have. And so when you have an interaction with someone, sometimes they can behave in a certain way, they can respond in a certain way, they can say certain things because they are having that response based upon the beliefs that the things that they believe, the beliefs that they have, and the stories that they tell themselves, the internal narratives. And what's really, really important to understand is that there's always two realities. There's always two things at play here. There's the actual reality that you see, right? The actual reality that you see around you, what you actually see in the world around you, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, like on the surface of it. And then the second reality is what's actually going on, right? So it's like an iceberg, that they say something like the tip of the iceberg that you see is actually only 10% of what's actually going on, what's actually that actual mass. And that's the same with other people's behavior. When you see their behavior, when they respond to you in a certain way, and it's something that triggers something within you, or maybe it doesn't trigger something within you, but it's like this response that just seems so kind of, wow, that kind of seems crazy. It's a response within them. And it's because there's two things at play. That's what you're seeing is only 10% of actually what's happening. Because on the surface of it, the interaction that you have with that person is just really the surface. There's all of these beliefs and the narratives that you have inside of you that are dictating how you how you behave and you engage with them. And there's all these stories that they have inside of them that is dictating how they respond to you. And so we can never make assumptions based upon what's kind of going on. And we do this all the time. We actually make assumptions about people, about hey Roz, about people, about situations, about past events, about future events. How many times have you done this? How many of you are guilty of this? What I call future tripping. Literally, something hasn't even happened yet, but you've already decided in your mind, you've already pictured how it's going to go. You're already like, okay, I just know how this conversation is going to go. I know that when I talk to my partner about this, we're going to have this argument, or this is going to happen, or something is just going to happen, right? How often do you future trip, right? And so we make assumptions all the time about things that are going to happen, or things that have happened and the reasons why they have happened. You actually might look at something and go, oh, you know what? I have been in a situation like that before, or I've dealt with a similar person like that before. And so I know why they're behaving that way. So I'm going to make an assumption that they're behaving that way because I've seen this happen before. But here's the thing. No two experiences, no two situations are the same, because no two people are the same. So you might deal, let's just take an example of a really negative coworker. I think we've all probably dealt with a negative coworker, or just a negative person in general. You have that interaction with someone, maybe you kind of get to know a little bit about them, right? And you kind of draw your own conclusions, you come to your own conclusions, you make some assumptions about how they are behaving, or why they are behaving in the way that they're behaving. You make an assumption and you say, well, they've got this going on at home, there's this going on, in their life, they've got this, they're a really negative person, you just draw all these kind of assumptions, all these kind of conclusions, make all these assumptions based upon why you think they're behaving in the way that they're behaving. And you're doing that based upon the narratives that you have, because maybe you've come across a situation like this before. Maybe you've come across a negative person like this before. Maybe you are you were that person, right? So you have drawn a conclusion based upon your own narratives. But here's the thing. No two situations are the same. No two experiences are the same, because no two people are the same. You might have very similar situations. You might have there might be very similar factors, but they're two different people with their own circumstances, with their own narratives, with their own things going on, and that is determining why they're behaving in the way that they're behaving. So it would be really easy to look at somebody, and maybe you're seeing kind of resistance from that person, and maybe they're behaving in a certain way, And you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, well, I know why they're behaving that way, because I've dealt with this before. They're behaving this way because they just hate this, or because they just hate that, or because, well, they're just a really negative person, or, anything, But no two people are the same. And so while there might be similarities, they're both unique individuals with very, very different narratives. Sometimes narratives can be similar, but different perspectives. And so it would be wrong to make assumptions based upon the fact that you have experienced or encountered this before. And even when it comes down to the same person, it would be wrong to assume that somebody is behaving right now in the moment for a specific reason because that's how they behaved last week, they behaved last week because of that. They behaved last week like that because of this. Because here's the thing, we have this broad range of narratives on everything, like everything. Like, it is actually crazy when you start to really examine how you're thinking, why what you think, why you think what you think. You think thoughts all the time. Like, every single microsecond of the day, you are thinking something. And what happens is that you have thoughts that you don't even realize you're thinking. So there's the subconscious mind and the conscious mind, right? So the conscious mind is the thoughts that you are aware of, right? And you, right now I'm sat opposite like A&W and Subway, and I'm looking at the sign and I'm going, oh, that sign's green. Oh, the A&W sign is orange, right? I'm conscious of that thought, right? I'm conscious of the thoughts I'm having right now because I'm talking to you, because I made some notes so that I would make sure that I stay on track, and I'm conscious of what's going on around me, and I'm conscious of how I look on camera, and conscious of the people that are interacting on here, and I'm conscious sometimes that there are people that come on here, that it doesn't tell me who they are, but I can see people are watching. I'm conscious of those thoughts. But there are subconscious thoughts that I think, but I'm not aware of thinking, because they're in my subconscious mind. They're like that iceberg, right? So the things I just mentioned, that's like the tip of the iceberg. But all the stuff underneath is stuff that I do, and I almost do on autopilot, and you're the same too. You do on autopilot because that's just what you were taught from a young age, right? You don't go and run on the highway because you were taught from a young age that that's a dangerous thing to do. So it doesn't even occur to you to go out and run on the highway because that's just never something that you've been taught to do. And so therefore that it's unsafe. So your subconscious mind, tells you not to do that because that would be really, really unsafe, right? And that would be dangerous, and there's a possibility that you might die or get very seriously injured. And so your subconscious mind keeps you safe and stops you from doing that. But just like you have those thoughts about that, you also have thoughts about other things that you don't realize you're having that actually stop you from maybe moving forward in a certain area. So just like my subconscious mind and your subconscious mind stops you from running out on the highway because you've been taught that that's dangerous and it's unsafe, and so therefore your brain has been programmed. And it's actually, by the way, it's really actually very interesting when you look at thoughts and you look at the brain and how your prefrontal cortex develops, and it literally looks like little trees. You've got all these branches, and it's actually really fascinating. And when you do a brain scan, the ones that are the thickest, like the little trees, they look like little stalks of broccoli actually. The ones that are the thickest are the ones that you repeat over and over and over and over again. And so just like I don't go and run out on the highway because, in my prefrontal cortex, there is a pathway where I have learned not to do that. There are also other things in my prefrontal cortex that I have learned about certain things in my life, that I have learned about myself. I've learned about relationships. I believe about other people. Things that I think about, what is possible, what isn't possible. Things that I think about, when it comes to money, or when it comes to career aspirations, or when it comes to relationships. A really big one for me that I really had to work hard on to address this was when I became a stepmom. You know, there were certain pathways, neuro pathways that had developed in my brain, thoughts that were in my subconscious mind, which dictated how I behaved in my relationship with my children. And there would constantly be this kind of headbutting, or, you know, this kind of opposing forces, because I was behaving in a certain way based upon what I thought to be correct, what I thought to be right, what I thought I should behave. And I found that those set of truths did not serve me in how I was living my life. It didn't serve me in my relationship with my children or with Kyle. And so I've had to kind of work on those and be like, okay, so that doesn't serve me anymore. Maybe that was something that did keep me safe and serve me at one point in my life. Maybe that was something that really served me well when I was single and I was living on my own, but that no longer serves me now. And so you have all these thoughts in your subconscious mind that dictate how you behave, and what you think, and basically how you live your life. And so because we have so many different narratives going on in our minds, it would be wrong for somebody else to draw the same conclusion, because just like no two people are the same, no two narratives are necessarily the same. So you might have an argument with your spouse or your partner or your significant other or somebody in your life, and maybe on the surface, maybe on the face of it, what's presenting to you, their behavior, is just the same as it is every other time. They do this all the time, and it really annoys you, or really upsets you, or really bothers you. And you might sit there and think, well, you know what? I know why they're behaving this way. They're behaving this way because of this. This is always, this reoccurring narrative. But here's the thing with that. Here's what's dangerous in thinking, in why it's dangerous to think that. Because just like no two people are the same, no two narratives are the same. And just because a certain narrative dictates their behavior today doesn't necessarily, or just because a certain narrative dictated their behavior last week, doesn't mean that same narrative is dictating their behavior today. Hey, Aiden! Doesn't mean the same narrative is dictating their behavior today. So they may have had a certain narrative that had dictated how they were behaving last week. And then today, the behavior might look exactly the same, but they have a different narrative that is dictating their behavior today. And so everybody has these narratives. Everyone has these narratives for why they believe what they believe, why they behave how they behave, and it dictates how we respond to something and the kind of behavior that we receive. So I had a situation happen in my life this week, and it was something that really, really triggered me. And it was a conclusion that I felt that somebody else had come to based upon a prior experience that they had. Not a prior experience with me, but a prior experience that they had, because they had seen this behavior over and over and over again from other people. And so they had their own narratives, and they had come to their own conclusions about why they perceived that behavior in me. And it really, really just pissed me off, because I thought to myself, just because you have seen other people behave like that doesn't mean that you think you know my story. Doesn't mean that you have an insight into my story, or into why I behaved in a certain way. And so I sat and I kind of really had to work through it. And I realized, number one, they're a human being. It doesn't really matter who they are. You know what, guys? This could be your employer. This could be your mentor. You know, it could be a teacher. It could be somebody that you really, really respect. Somebody that you have so much respect for. You really look up to. You really emulate them. But they're still a human being, and they still have their own set of narratives. And they could have done significant work to work on their narratives. They could have done quite extensive work on their beliefs and their mindset and their narratives. But they still have narratives. You know, they still have, I am 36 years old, and I have 36 years of narratives to address. And just because you get to a certain point, or you get to a certain place in life, doesn't mean that you have it all figured out. It mean you might be further along the path than somebody else. But, something that I talked about a couple of weeks here was emotional regulation, and how we'd been to a conference and we'd listened to this amazing woman psychologist talking about emotional regulation. And she said, emotional regulation is something that you are taught. She said, and you can, and if you're never taught how to do that, then it doesn't really matter how old you are. You could be a 60-year-old farmer and still not be able to regulate your emotions. So, you could see somebody who literally is, they are maybe somebody that you look up to, somebody that you emulate, somebody that you respect, and they do something that is so disappointing to you. And you think to yourself, yeah, but they have it all together. They've got it all figured out. Well, this is a lifelong journey, and they might be further ahead, or I don't even really see it as further ahead, because I don't really like that phrase. They might be in a different place or a different spot to you in certain areas of their life, but it doesn't mean that they aren't a human being and they have it all together in all areas of their life. The more that you are self-aware, and the more that you take the time to look within, and the more that you do the work, the more results that you're going to see, the more things that you're going to unearth, the more healing you're going to get, and the more changes you're going to see in your outer world. But just because you do all of those things doesn't mean that there aren't certain narratives that you still have that still need to be addressed. And it also doesn't mean that there aren't certain things in my story that don't trigger you, and vice versa. Right? So again, you could have somebody who maybe you feel made a really unfair conclusion about you. And maybe it's somebody that you look up to, or somebody you have a lot of respect for. But it doesn't mean that just because you have a lot of respect for them, and it doesn't mean that just because they haven't made super crazy progress and great strides in one area, that there isn't other areas that they still have to work on. There aren't still narratives that are unearthed for them. It doesn't mean that there aren't things that aren't going to trigger them, right? So something about, your story could trigger them, and vice versa. But what this actually forced me to do, this experience, what it forced me to do is to sit back and go, okay, well, first of all, this person's a human being. They're just human, right? And the human experience means that sometimes we're going to get it wrong. But the beautiful thing is taking the time to get the insight and the understanding, and to kind of grow from that. Right? So number one, they're a human being. Number two, they have their own set of narratives, their own set of stories and beliefs, based upon the experiences that they've had, maybe the work that they've done or haven't done, what they've been told, all of that. And maybe, there was something in the interaction with me that just triggered something in them. But because something was triggered in them, that then triggered something in me. And it made me sit and look at, what are my own narratives? Why did this upset me so much? Why did it bother me so much? And I really took the time to kind of dig deep and go, okay, so why is this bothering me? What is, what's going on here? And what it led me to do was to actually identify some old beliefs I had. And I have a friend, and she actually has this really great analogy, and she calls it clearing out the loft. So if you guys are from the UK, you will recognize this term. If you're not, you're probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about. The loft is like the attic, right? Or you know what, if you're in North America and you have a house with a basement, it's like the basement, right? So if you think about it, like the attic, or if you want to call it the loft or the basement, is where you basically go and store, you put stuff into storage, right? And it can stay there for years. Or maybe for you, it's a wardrobe or a closet or somewhere that ends up being what I call your dumping ground, right? You kind of, maybe it's that like junk drawer in the kitchen, and you go and store all your stuff there, right? And then eventually you kind of come back and you go through it and you sort through stuff, and you're like, oh, I forgot I had this. Awesome. Yeah, keep that. Oh, no, that's garbage. Throw it out. And when you kind of go through this experience of stuff triggering you, that's kind of cleaning out your basement or your attic or your loft. You know, that contrast is actually not something to be feared, and it's not something to see as a negative. It's actually something to be celebrated, because what it allows you to do, it allows you to gain some introspection into yourself and into your beliefs, and why you behave in the way that you do, why you think the way that you do, and what is guiding you. So what this situation allowed me to do was to clean out my basement, clean out my attic. You know, it allowed me to go back and look at my narratives, why I was getting triggered by something, what it was triggering, what it was bringing up within me, and if it was something that was actually serving me, if it was something that I wanted to keep or I wanted to get rid of. And so when you actually do that, when you actually take the time to do that, what happens is you kind of clear out that kind of old energy, you clear out that stale energy, and you make space for new energy, right? So when a situation comes up like that, that's negative, you know, the tendency is that it kind of makes you feel kind of crappy, and you want to just go and you want to lick your wounds. But if you do something different and you say, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to honor my feelings, first of all. I'm going to honor how I feel. I'm going to honor the fact that I feel like this. It's okay to feel like this. But I'm going to take this as an opportunity to dig deeper and understand why I was feeling the way that I felt. When you do that, you actually clear away that old stale energy, and you actually make room to invite in something into your life that is positive and is good and is what you want. So how do you then change your narrative? So when you have a situation like this, how do you change your narrative? So I want to give you a few quick fire ways that you can actually change your narrative. So, okay, you've been through a negative experience. You recognize that it's not something that you wanted. Rather than kind of feeling frustrated by it, rather than kind of seeing it as a negative, you decide you're going to flip on its head, and you're actually going to see it as a positive, and you're going to use this to kind of identify old narratives that you have and rewire your brain. So what can you do to kind of do this? Well, the first thing that you need to do is you need to kind of be aware of what they are, right? So you kind of need to be aware of the fact that you have narratives, right? So for the most part, most of us are not aware of this. Like, for the most part, most of us do not spend absolutely any time thinking about what we're thinking about. We kind of just have these thoughts all day, every day. We get pissed off at people. You know, we think, well, he's a freaking loser. Like, what a jerk he was to me. We don't think about what we're thinking about. Right? We get triggered left, right, and center. We get angry. We feel happy. We feel sad. We have all these range of emotions, but we never actually stop to think about what we're thinking about, and to think about why we're thinking about something, and what caused that specific neural pathway, where that came from, and what we can do to change it. So the first thing to do is to actually be aware of your thoughts. Okay? And that requires you to dig deep and unlock very deep parts of your subconscious. You don't know what you don't know, right? So, you know, it's no good if you sit here and you go, okay, so what's in my subconscious today? You know, you actually have to kind of go through a process of actually doing that. So the first thing to do is, number one, to stop, When something happens that triggers you, that frustrates you, that maybe wasn't what you wanted, was a negative experience, stop and recognize that this is an opportunity for growth. So stop and think about what happened, the situation, why it triggered you, how it made you feel. Okay, well, how did it make me feel? Well, actually, it made me feel this way. Well, this is kind of what went through my head, right? And to think about that. And then once you've kind of done that and you've kind of run through that, there's a series of different ways that you can then identify your narratives, either in that moment or, as an exercise afterwards. The first thing is go through a guided process. It is just